Welcome back, everybody, to What Really Matters. I'm Tablet Deputy Editor Jeremy Stern with you in Los Angeles. I'm here, as always, with Walter Russell Mead, Tablet news writer, Global View columnist at The Wall Street Journal, and distinguished fellow at Hudson. Let's start with this week's news. First story of the week. Benny Gantz, a member of Israel's war cabinet, sharply criticized Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war in Gaza and threatened to quit the government in June if Netanyahu doesn't articulate a plan for ending the war and securing the enclave of more than 2 million Palestinians. Gantz laid out his own ideas for what that plan should look like, including a demilitarized Gaza Strip with Israeli security control, an interim civil administration with Palestinian and joint U.S., European, Arab responsibility, and a strategy for freeing Israeli hostages. He set a June 8th deadline for Israel's war cabinet to approve plans to accomplish those goals. Walter, news or faux news?
I have to say, probably a bit of faux news there. I mean, it's man who wants to be prime minister criticizes the guy who has the job now. Doesn't look to me as if this is going to succeed in pushing out Netanyahu. And it also, if you read it carefully, it looks to me like there's a lot of wiggle room there. So let's wait and see. But right now, I would say I doubt we're going to see Bibi capitulate, and I doubt we're going to see him leave the cabinet. But we'll see. If he did, I don't think it would change. Bibi would still have the majority.
Our colleague Mike Duran has been arguing that Gantz is the Biden administration's man in Jerusalem, and that they see him as perhaps a potentially more pliant prime minister, which Gantz has been happy to indulge. To what extent do you see the administration interfering in Israeli politics to this degree, or is this more of a coincidence of overlapping interests?
I'm sure that they're maneuvering. But I'm not quite sure. Do they actually believe that Gantz would be that much more pliable? The closer you look at it, it looks to me as if on the things that the administration cares the most about, no Israeli prime minister is going to give them a lot of running room. It also looks to me as if, and we may get to this a little bit later, but since the death of Raisi, if anything, the U.S. seems to have been drawing a bit closer to Israel, and certainly the ICC developments have brought the administration closer. So, yeah, honestly, does Bibi try to interfere in American politics? Yes, he does. Do the Americans try to interfere in Israeli politics? Yes, they do. Are any of us surprised? You shouldn't be.
All right, our second story. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi was killed in a helicopter crash, depriving the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei of a longtime ally as Tehran angles for regional dominance through armed militias that are fighting the U.S. and Israel. Raisi's death was announced Monday after state TV reported Sunday afternoon that a helicopter carrying him and the Iranian foreign minister had made a, quote, difficult landing in northwestern Iran. The official story so far is bad weather, and Mother Nature could well be the culprit, but according to The Economist, many Iranians have begun to speculate about more nefarious explanations. Raisi has a long list of internal enemies, from the relative moderates he is marginalized to the fellow conservatives who think he has been an inept president. It's not unreasonable to wonder if domestic foes conspired to kill him. Walter, news or faux news?
I would say basically faux news. It doesn't appear to make much difference to Iranian policy that this guy would still be around. I think it's, what is it? Freud said once, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. You have a 50-year-old airplane that has not been a helicopter, not been carefully maintained, flying in bad weather, in dangerous ground. I don't know if we really need some huge explanation why this thing crashed. It crashed because it crashed. There just does not, to me, seem to be a lot going on here. And in a sense, even if, oh my goodness, it was this faction internally that did it, it's not going to make much difference to Iranian policy. It's not going to bring the regime down. It's not going to affect the fact that the Iranian presidency is not that powerful of post, that the supreme leader really is in charge. So I would say nothing burger on the whole.
All right, final story of the week. Workers at two Mercedes-Benz plants near Tuscaloosa, Alabama, rejected a unionization drive by the United Auto Workers, a setback for the union's hopes of making broader gains in the South after winning a highly touted deal at a Tennessee Volkswagen plant in April. About 56% of the vote went against the UAW, according to the National Labor Relations Board. Mercedes would have been the second foreign-owned automaker in the South to join the UAW after Volkswagen, and the union had wanted to show that win wasn't a one-off. Walter, news or faux news?
Not a lot of news there. South remains anti-union. It's much too early. Are there going to be 15 other certification elections across the South, and who will win how many of them? One election, two elections doesn't make a huge trend. It was certainly disappointing for the UAW that they weren't able to notch up another victory. But does this really tell us? It tells us what? It tells us that 56% of the people at that particular plant don't want to be in the union. But it's much too soon to tell. What does this say to us about the rest of the South or the future of the campaign, of the UAW campaign? So I would say doesn't tell us much.
All right, that does it for the news this week. Let's have the big conversation. So, Walter, you first started writing about what you called the Axis of Weevils, including China, Russia, and Iran, back in 2013 when China started making aggressive moves in the South China Sea. Russia foiled Ukraine's attempt to join an economic association agreement with the European Union, and Iran was making gains in Syria. Since then, of course, China's cabbage leaf strategy has only become more predominant and put greater pressure on Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines. We're now 11 years into Russia's war in Ukraine, and Iran has sown chaos across the Middle East, including not only Syria, but Yemen, Iraq, the Red Sea, the Gaza Strip, southern Lebanon, and northern Israel, and so on. So tell us where this informal alliance of revisionist powers stands. How much are they cooperating or coordinating with each other, and what fissures, if any, prevent them from cooperating even more?
Okay, well, I don't think we can call them the Axis of Weevils anymore. This was back in the day when they were sort of cautiously tunneling through the world system, trying to eat it out from within, but without wanting to take on a direct challenge with the U.S. They are now much more resilient, much more ready to take on the U.S., have much less respect for American power, wisdom, and will. So I think what we have to say is that the last 10, 12 years have seen a steady increase in the power of these adversaries of the current system. They are working together more effectively. They are coordinating their activities greater. They are willing to take on more risks, and they are willing to defy America, more willing than ever to defy American pressure. And I think it's worth our remembering that really we're looking at 12 years, rather than criticizing the Biden administration or the Trump administration. We should see that what we're seeing is over Obama, Trump, and Biden. We are not seeing anything like an American ability to reverse the momentum here. Are they working more closely together? Well, the first thing we have to say is they really don't trust each other or like each other at all. The Iranians consider the Russians to be completely uncivilized infidels who are all going to burn in hell. Same thing of the Chinese. The Chinese consider the Russians barbarians and the Iranians mad, superstitious theocrats. And the Russians just can't get over their horror at the rise of China, its ability to surpass Russia and reach higher levels of technology and wealth than Russia. So they're all fundamentally, culturally and geopolitically, they have very different views of the world. But they are still held together by a united determination to bring down American power. And why are they interested in doing this? I think it's two main reasons, one offensive and one defensive. Offensively, all of them have gains they want to make that American power is resisting. China wants Taiwan. It wants that 9-dash line. I guess they're starting to call it a 10-dash line in the South China Sea pretty soon. Who knows? The 11-dash, 12-dash. These things can just get longer and longer every time you find a new old map somewhere. Then you've got Iran, which again continues to want to push across the Middle East, deepen its hegemony. It still has this dream that if Iran could control the world's oil in and out of the flow of Middle Eastern oil and harness all of that money to its own ambitions, this would make Iran a great global power. Iranian history is full of the idea that the Persian Empire, going back thousands of years, ought to be a major world player, not some little tiny country in the backwoods somewhere. And so Iran's leaders see in the mix of their ideology and their geopolitical obsession, they see this path toward a restoration of glory. And the Russians, of course, want to overturn the European security order that limits their influence in Western Europe, but also Putin very much wants to rejoin the old Soviet Union, again, not as a communist, but as a Russian nationalist. That's Putin's goal. So all of these goals can only be achieved by pushing the United States out of the way. Of them, I think both China's plans in Taiwan and Iran's plans in the Middle East, if those succeeded, they would lead to sort of catastrophic failure of American power, or rather of the substance, the coherence of the American order, and the American ability to protect its own interests. Russia is slightly more complicated in the sense that a Russian victory in Ukraine would not in and of itself destroy the European balance of power, but it would make life more challenging for us and for our allies, and Russia would move from that victory to try to achieve the next one in sequence. So you have that. So they really are revisionist powers. They want to change the way the world works, but they're also ideological. They all see Western liberalism as a threat to their own stability. The Chinese are terrified that if the ordinary Chinese people were able to express itself, were able to hear enough, that the CCP could lose its control over China. Not necessarily that it would build up some kind of liberal democracy instead, but that there would be a kind of chaos bringing down the current structure. And in the same way, Putin sees, particularly in Ukraine, he sees a mortal threat. If Ukraine were actually to consolidate, to move toward the West, to be economically successful, this would be a gun at Putin's head, because the message to people inside Russia is, we don't need a dictator like this. We don't need to live in some backward, weird, Orthodox Slav, spooky, authoritarian traditionalism. We can actually, like Europeans, we can kind of live in a different type of society. Putin does not want them to think that's true. And of course, the Iranians see the secularism and the liberalism that comes out of the West as something that could tear their country and their authority and their theocracy apart. So they're driven into this kind of anti-American framework, despite their hatred of each other, despite their suspicion of each other, despite the many, many tensions between them. And in a way, just as the U.S. and Israel are working together, even though we're driving each other crazy. So you don't have, or we're having spats with Germany and other countries. Just as on our side, you have very different points of view among different countries and different priorities and so on. You have the same thing over there in the formerly Axis of Weevils. They're now a much bigger deal, but for now they're continuing to work together.
Given the divisions and mistrust that you described between the three powers, are there opportunities for the U.S. to exploit the way we did maybe with the Soviet Union and China or Yugoslavia during the Cold War? Or does that not exist at this moment?
I think at the moment, no. I think if Putin actually thought that the U.S. had become, that China was becoming more powerful than the U.S., Putin might actually, or his successor, might at that point be tempted to flip, because the fear of being swallowed up by China would become a very real one. But I think for now, there are all these fantasies of pulling. I mean, American presidents going back to really George W. Bush have tried to look into Putin's soul, have tried to peel him off from Russia. It just doesn't work. And I don't think it's going to. Iran, again, I don't see much of a way that this government could be persuaded to move in a different way. So I think we're actually we're stuck with this for a while.
All right, that does it for the big conversation. Let's end on the tip of the week. You're in London today, Walter, a city you know well. So tell us, what are your favorite spots to visit or things to do and see in London?
Okay, well, I don't know if you can hear me, but there's jackhammering going on behind me here today in London. And it's also raining. It's lovely to get in London on a beautiful May day, and it's raining and cold. So London is remaining true to itself in spite of all the reasons it should be beautiful and full of flowers. Is just not going that way. There are some really cool things to see in London. A couple of them that I think about are, so many writers have lived here. And in a number of cases, their homes have been preserved and turned into museums. So Samuel Johnson's house has been preserved, and you can go there and see the rooms, the room where he worked on the dictionary. They've also got this wonderful statue of his favorite cat outside that you can go see. And Thomas Carlyle, also, his old house is now a museum. And Virginia Woolf's father, actually, of all people, played a major role in putting this thing together, because after Carlyle died, a lot of his stuff was sold off and so on. Virginia Woolf's father actually worked to try to bring all of this stuff together as a kind of a shrine to Carlyle. It's in a nice part of town. It's down by the river. It's well worth sort of going out and seeing a little bit of what London used to look like. But so while you're here, yeah, it's great. Go to the National Portrait Gallery. I'm sitting in a hotel not far from Trafalgar. It's actually the place near Trafalgar Square where Benjamin Franklin actually lived. I think it may be the only house Franklin lived in that is still standing today. I don't believe his houses in Philadelphia have survived. And he actually lived quite a long time here when he was this agent of some of the American colonies, basically a lobbyist in Parliament for American colonies. So lots of great things to see here in London. I hope everybody who hasn't been to London, make sure you get over here. It is one of the world's greatest cities.
All right, there you have it. Thanks to our producer, Noam Bloom. Thanks to Will Cummings at Hudson and my co-host, Walter Russell Mead. I'm Jeremy Stern. We'll see you next week. And until then, please go rate and review us. This helps other people find the show.